My mom's friend Kimberly. When my mom was in high school, there was a girl named Kimberly. Kimberly insisted that people call her Little K, so they did. My mom and Kimberly became friends quickly. Kimberly was pretty, friendly, funny, and very good with people. They did everything together, and Kimberly always came over to my grandparents' house on weekends or after school. Whenever it came to getting undressed or changing clothes, Kimberly was never comfortable. She would go into the bathroom or hide behind a door. When my mom would ask, why'd she just say, "My body isn't nice, you wouldn't understand why," my mom just shrugged it off. After 2 years of being friends, my mom realized she had never been to Kimberly's home. She asked Kimberly if she could go over. Kimberly was hesitant at first, but then she agreed and said, "I trust you." My mom didn't really know what she meant, but she just shrugged it off. The day came around for my mother to go over. She didn't really know what to expect, but my mom certainly didn't expect this. When she pulled up in front of the house, the place was a dump. The windows were smashed, the paint peeling, dirty toys and nappies all over the front lawn. The car looked like it hadn't been used in a bazillion years, and the grass was all outgrown. My mother started to get a bit worried. Kimberly welcomed her into the house, being her typical smiley self. When my mother was in the house, it was just as bad as the outside. It reeked of mildew and feces, and the carpet was stained and ripped. The wallpapers was ripped and torn in some places, and there were baby clothes, toys, nappies, bottles, and you name it, all throughout the house. My mom wanted to be polite, so she smiled as usual and followed Kimberly. The kitchen had piles on piles of dishes. There were broken glass all over, some chairs were broken, and all of it was just dirty. The living room was completely bare except for a couch, just one couch and nothing else. When my mother had seen most of the rooms, all of them being smelly and dirty, Kimberly said, "I need to show you something." My mom wondered how Kimberly, such a proud, happy girl, could live in such a dump. My mom followed Kimberly into a room, and she realized what it was straight away, a baby's room. It was in perfect condition, except it smelt foul. Weird, my mom thought. The cot was pristine white, and all the dolls and toys were intact. The clothes were missing from the closet, and some things weren't there, but other than that it looked normal. And then Kimberly said, "Come over here, but be quiet." When my mom walked over to the cot and looked down, she was shocked. Never in a lifetime did my mom expect to see a dead dog wearing baby clothes and a bonnet. The poor dog's fur was falling out, and the sheets were smeared in blood and feces. The skin was rotting and the smell was putrid. "Isn't she beautiful? Her name is Sarah. She's my baby. She died when she was just born, but I just couldn't let her go. Isn't that sweet?" My mom was utterly shocked. From there, I don't know what happened. My mother left and called the police. Kimberly still came to school but avoided my mother. But before school ended, she left and didn't come back. When I met her, she seemed exceedingly normal. Her name was Alice, a short, white Wisconsin girl with wavy brown hair and an ever-present Packers jacket. She liked Pad Thai and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. She gussed over black and white movies. She couldn't dance if her life depended on it, and she caused one of the most terrifying years of my life. Whoops, am I right? I was heading to this weekly improv show, but my friends whom I usually went with was out of town, so I posted an open invite on a university Facebook group. I got exactly one response from this random girl, Alice, but my socially awkward ass was all over it. She came to the show and we hit it off big time. Cue the coffee meetups and Netflix binges, blah blah blah. We started dating. Life was pretty good for a while. Then came the first messages, a lovely series of blurbs from a man named Eric. His profile picture was a skinny guy in thick-rimmed glasses with a beanie, and his tongue sticking out of his open smile. This becomes important later, trust me. For now, what's important is this spattering of angry Facebook DMs from this man I never met, detailing why I'm not a good boyfriend, and that I'm hurting Alice, and how I just don't understand her like he does. I was a bit annoyed but mostly confused. I talked to Alice about it, but she just hand-waved it away. "He's a jerk," she said. "I don't hang out with him anymore." It wasn't the most satisfying explanation, but aggressively jealous guys aren't exactly an anomaly, so I just blocked him and thought that that was the end of it. A few months passed by, summer came and went. Alice had planned to study abroad, so when I came back to school, she was already halfway across the world. It was only a few months, I thought. No big deal. Over those next few months, I would become Facebook acquainted with a myriad of strange individuals. There was Leia. Her Facebook profile was just a Facebook silhouettes icon. She sent an array of messages justifying Eric's anger, reiterating that my relationship with Alice was unhealthy and toxic, and that Alice and Eric have a much better history. She also included a blurry photo of a girl sitting on top of and making out with a skinny guy. Both of their faces were obscured, but Leia swore it was Alex and Eric from sometime during the summer. There was Nick. Facebook pic was a guy on a skateboard in front of sunsets. He readily admitted that he had feelings for Alice, but made it clear that neither he nor Eric had any right to be upset about her not being with them. He said that Leia and Eric were liars, and he tried to set them straight. Relative to the other, he seemed semi-okay, but he let slip a few bitter-sounding messages. He sounded like a loose cannon, always a little on edge. There was Hannah, Facebook pic, two silhouetted girls in front of a sunset. She showed up after I blocked Leia. She claimed to be a childhood friend of Alice. Cue the same old, your relationship is bad shit. There was Chris, Facebook pic, a white blonde boy in sunglasses, very elusive. He would send one cryptic message every once in a while. He never replied to any of my messages. There was Mark, Facebook pic, two pairs of feet, one male, one female. He apologized for the actions of the others. He tried to fill me in on the group's dynamics and history. In the physical absence of Alex, he offered to meet up to talk to me. Like an idiot, I agreed. We set a time and place. He never showed up, and I never heard of him again. There was Sarah, there was David, and there were so many. This was all spread over a period of time. Usually I blocked or stopped hearing from one person before hearing from another one. Digital harassment after digital harassment with some vague threats sprinkled in. Meanwhile, Alice is extremely difficult to get a hold of. I chalk this up to vastly different time zones, but even when I do hear from her, she's really dismissive on the whole subject. I don't know what to do, she said. And then I get an accusation. One day she sends me the question, who's Mary? I tell her the truth that I don't know who Mary is. She sends me screenshots of texts she received from an unknown number in them. Says the sender wrote that her name is Mary and that she is in love with me. He told me he loved me, Mary wrote. He had sex with me, and now he has not called me back. If you feel like the story is rapidly losing focus, it's because it is. There were so many disparate things going on, and I could not for the life of me understand why. At that point, I was just about losing my mind, but this is where things got beyond crazy. I started to get texts from Mary. She asked why I hadn't called her. She asked if I meant what I said to her. She told me that she'd come to me. She said that she'd see me on campus, here, there, at this event, at this particular time. And anytime she said she had seen me in a place or a particular time, I realized I'd actually been at that place at that time. I started looking over my shoulder. I didn't know what to do. I had no face, no name to report. Then I hear from Nick again. He said he found Mary. He said he tried to talk to her, and she tried to pull a gun on him, but the situation was resolved, and she was now being put in treatment. That's all I could squeeze out of him. I am beyond confused at this point. I am beyond afraid. I call Alice. I tell her I can't do this anymore. I had no clue what was going on, but I knew somehow they were all involved, and I wanted no part in it. I cut off contact with her, and then everything, the messages, the texts, it all stopped. A friend of mine realized something soon after. Barely any of Alice's friends had their faces on Facebook. We did some digging. Eric's pics was some photo off a Tumblr blog full of cute nerds. The photo of Chris, the one with the white boy with sunglasses, was an obscure photo of Justin Bieber. The photo of Nick, the skateboarder, was a stock photo. Hannah's photos was art from a book ad. David was apparently a Korean pop star. We also noticed something else horrific. All of their profiles were created around the time I met Alice. To this day, I don't understand it. Fast forward 2 years, I get a text message from an unknown number. That number looks familiar, I think to myself, and then I realize it's Alice. The text consists of one word. Talk? Sorry, Alice, but let's not meet. Childhood friend grew up to be a Facebook stalker. Around first grade, I became friends with this kid named Stan. He was a couple years older than I was, but he had a sister that was my age who I was also friends with. I also had a wicked crush on their oldest brother, James. I lost contact with all three around middle school. Of course, when Facebook happened, I began getting in touch with people I'd gone to school with. It was a moderately sized K through 8th school, so you're basically with the exact same group of kids through each grade. This makes for some pretty strong bonds, I believe, because there's a lot of us who kept in contact after moving on to high school for a little while before drifting apart. Because of this, I was always really excited when I got back in touch with those people. However, not all of these connections have been positive. I got a friend request from Stan one day, under a different name. The messages were the typical, "How's it going? What have you been up to?" etc. Then he started sending messages that were about my looks. They weren't obscene, but they did make me a bit uncomfortable. He started pushing to meet up. I can't explain it, but I just had a feeling off about him, so I would kind of avoid making any kind of plans. He continued to be pushy about things, and finally I just stopped responding to his messages. I should also mention here that when I first accepted Stan's friend request, he literally went through every single one of my pictures and liked them. That should have been my first clue, but I just let it go. Then I started getting messages from friends, and even some family members asking me about him. Stan was going through and basically sending everyone friend requests. By this point, I'm like, what the fuck, this is weird. But things got really nuts while my cousin informed me that Stan had not only tried to friend her, he'd also sent her a message asking all sorts of questions about me, such as things I liked or places I liked to go to. My cousin was concerned that he was sending those kinds of messages to other people who might actually tell him what he wanted to know. I debated sending Stan a message telling him to back the fuck off, but decided to just block him and change all of my Facebook settings to make it as private as I possibly could. I could send out a mass message to all of my friends and family informing them of the situation, and to kindly not give any of my personal information out. I've been friends with James, but ended up blocking him as well, just to prevent Sam from getting access to anything. Things were quiet for about a week. Then the friend requests from random accounts started coming in. Some didn't have pictures, some had random images. They were accompanied by messages that made it clear that they were all from Stan, full of skeevy comments on my looks and how he just wanted to hook up. That's putting it mildly. Every day I had an account that needed to be blocked. I contacted Facebook about the situation, though they didn't really offer any kind of help. It finally came to a stop when I threatened Stan with a police intervention. My boyfriend at the time threatened to disembowel Stan and feed him his intestines with a side of fava beans. The peace lasted for about a year. Then I got a friend request from a girl I got to school with named Kelsey. We talked pretty frequently, both online and over the phone. She wanted us to hang out so that we could talk in person, but then she started bringing up more frequently and being persistent about it. I started to get that weird feeling again that something wasn't quite right. Then came the bombshell. Kelsey and Stan were dating. We'd been all in the same classes, so the fact that they knew each other wasn't strange for them to be dating. I confronted Kelsey about it and blocked her, but because we talked on the phone, they had my phone number. Of course, both began calling and texting crazy things nonstop. I finally had to get my number changed. It's been over 10 years since all of this, and I haven't heard from Stan once. Kelsey did try to friend me recently with a different account, and a look through her Facebook shows she's married to another man and no evidence of Stan. I'm not taking any chances though, so she's been blocked. We were looking for a flatmate. Last year, my partner and I were looking for a flatmate after a good friend of ours moved in with her boyfriend. We advertised online and through a group on Facebook for university students like myself in the area. We lived in a suburban area with nice houses and lots of families. I had a couple texts from people wanting to check out the room, but we didn't have much luck finding the right person. Our address and photos of our house weren't listed on any of the posts we put online. Fast forward a couple weeks and I was taking a shower just after dinner time. It was summer, still light outside, and my partner was chilling upstairs on her phone. She had just gone home from work and after a long shift had forgotten to lock the front door. Should also mention we live in a series of houses down a long driveway, and we were in the middle house and the front was unoccupied. My partner started knocking on the shower door, telling me that we have someone here to see the room. I was really confused. We hadn't heard from anyone recently. and thought maybe she was just having a laugh. She was always joking around about stupid stuff. I quickly grabbed my towel and opened the door to find myself face to face with a tall, middle-aged guy standing in the spare room opposite, still looking around. I had the creepiest vibe in my life. It was like a wave of fear coming over me. He kept his hands in his pockets the whole time, and stunk like he hadn't showered in weeks. My partner and I are both females, early 20s, and petite in build, and this guy was at least 6 foot and massive in size. I stepped in front of my partner and whispered to her to get back in the bathroom and lock the door, and tried not to freak out about this man in our house. I asked him what he was doing, and he muttered something about a spare room while looking towards the stairs as an escape route, and he had seen it online. He couldn't give any specific details. He looked at me dead in the eye and told me he was going to move in tomorrow, and something weird about how his religious beliefs were important to him. I lost my cool and screamed at him to get out of our house while ringing the police and banging on the bathroom door to be let back in. It must have caught him off guard. He obviously hadn't expected anyone to be home. He bolted down the stairs and out the front door without shutting it. We locked the front door and went straight back up to the bathroom, where we felt a bit safer. We watched from the window as he sprinted towards a car parked down a side street not far off. The section beside us is empty, so we had a clear view but couldn't read the number plate. The cops arrived really quickly and checked with us that we are okay. Apparently in the weeks prior, they had calls about break-ins and cars waiting outside other people's houses that put people on edge. There are a lot of burglaries in our area, and other people had a man of the same description hovering around their houses with excuses like they were a plumber or to work in their own maintenance on the property or something like that. We don't think the guy had a weapon on him, but when the police left, my partner was genuinely confused. Apparently, she had heard something in the hallway, seen the guy sneaking towards our room, and asked him if he was here for a viewing. She didn't have her wits about her at all. Would hate to think how the situation would have gone if I wasn't home. Never know if the guy was caught or not. Hope we never see him again. You're a really heavy sleeper. I'm a 36-year-old woman. When I was 26, I went through a life-altering, hope-crushing, has anyone seen my will to live kind of breakup. To save you from reading paragraphs of heartbreak, I will sum it up by saying that it would be more than 3 years before I got into another serious relationship, and that I probably would have not survived if my precious toddler girl hadn't needed her mama. About 2 months after the aforementioned breakup, some female friends invited me to the very large, old, and beautiful house that the two of them rented for a July 4th bonfire and cookout. When I arrived at the house, they told me they had invited a guy friend who they wanted me to meet. I had seen his picture on one of their MySpace friends list and commented that he was cute at some point before, but they promised there was no pressure. I was, after all, mostly still a raw and tragic mess at this point. In any case, the guy friend arrived and we were introduced. While he was not as cute as his profile picture, he was funny and easy to talk to. Besides, I wasn't looking for anything, so whatever. I then learned that he was quite taken with how gorgeous I was. We hung out at nights, and when he asked for my number, I gave it to him because he seemed decent enough as a person. Fast forward 2 weeks or so, we've talked a little through text and instant messenger, and I've hung out with our group of mutual friends a handful of times. I made it very clear that I am in no fit state for a relationship, and that I can't go there if that's what he's after. He says he understands, and that he enjoys my company. Fair enough. One night, after we've been out with our group, at our usual bar and restaurants, I agreed to go back to his place with them. We hang out, have sex like consenting adults, and go to sleep. No big deal. The next morning, we're just hanging out and chatting a bit before I have to head home. At some point he says, "You know, you're a really heavy sleeper." My initial reaction is to chuckle and agree that yes, I sleep like dead before I catch something sort of odd in his tone that I can't put my finger on. I say, "Wait, what do you mean?" He stumbles over his words a little and says, "Oh, I just honestly thought you were pretending to be asleep because you were making those little noises like you were enjoying yourself." I felt like someone had poured ice water down my spine and was speechless for a moment before I said, "What did you do to me?" He blanched at my tone and said, "Nothing really. I mean, once I realized you were really asleep, I stopped." He refused to elaborate on that statement, and I felt absolutely sickened. In the months following this, he would obsessively send me messages on MySpace at all hours of the night, telling me things like Have fun getting laid, cunt. Apparently, this all stemmed from his inability to understand why I didn't want to be his girlfriend or see him anymore. He started flirting with my friends in an attempt to make me jealous, and even started trying to chat up the 15-year-old sister of my best friend, except that his flirtation devolved into saying he hated her because she reminded him of me. In the end, his batshit behavior only stopped when one of my friends responded positively to his advances. They're still married as far as I know. I contacted him about 5 years ago, wanting to apologize for any pain I might have caused him. He ended up making inappropriate comments on my Facebook pictures in the middle of the night and picked weird, petty fights with my fiancée in the comments. Even though he's married to a psychiatrist, his actions made it abundantly clear that growth and rational behavior still aren't his strong suits. I now live 700 miles away from where I first met him. Unfortunately, I learned about a year ago that now he lives in the same state. Thinking about him still makes my skin crawl. I lived in fear of him realizing that I'm a relatively short drive away, and I hope on all that is sacred that we never meet again. Dangerous friends. I apologize if this is long and it seems like I'm rambling, but most details will come into play later. I'm a 17-year-old male. This story happened to me a few months ago, about 4 to 5, but I will give details of things that happened much earlier, dating back to 3rd grade actually, so here's what you basically need to know about me. As I said, I'm 17, almost 18. I live in a camper, not because I have to, but I plan on traveling and it's also convenient. I of course don't live alone. Until I'm 18, it's next to my grandfather's house, who I live with and help out. I weigh over 300 pounds, and am about 6'3" to 6'4" tall. But back in 3rd grade I was short, but still chubby. 3rd grade I had no friends, and due to me being short and chubby, I got made fun of a lot. Nothing serious, just some kids' jokes, but serious enough that I didn't have any friends besides one, who I've known literally all my life. He's not very important to the story though. It was breakfast time before class started. I just walked into the cafe. It was pretty big, but mostly empty because most kids would arrive near the end, and I normally would too, but this day I ended up coming early. Some kid, I had no idea why, but he called out to me. We started talking and it got to games. After a bit, he mentions that he had Spider-Man 3 on Xbox and had trouble with it, and asked if I wanted to come over and play it. I agreed. He told me where he lived, which was actually just down the road. I was a slow walker, so it took me about 10 minutes to get there, but it usually only takes 5 if you walk normally. School ended and I went home. I was excited about visiting another kid's house, since I only visited the friend I mentioned earlier. I asked my grandpa, and he eventually agreed, after I pulled out the puppy dog eyes. I went down there and we hung out. I don't remember exactly what went down though. After that we started talking more, and before I knew it, we were close friends. A year passes. I'm now around 10 years old. This kid was bad news, but in a good way in my eyes. He was a thief and a liar. We often went to a local Walmart and stole, and even went as far as to steal from our families. Heck, we even started smoking. How did we get to this point? Well, it turns out his father is also bad news, so it rubbed off. He taught his son, we'll call him Jack, things, and he taught me. And since he was one of my 2 only friends, I would follow, even if I didn't want to. I remember this one day. It was a Sunday. We were supposed to go to Sunday school, but instead, we woke up really early, stole about $70 from my grandpa, took a bus to Walmart, and went on a shopping spree. When we arrived home, we found my father, who lived close to us, waiting for our return. We got in tons of trouble, but my grandfather let us keep what we took, hoping it'd make us feel bad, and it did. Skip ahead a few years, I'm 14 years old. My father had passed away about 2 years ago, and I often skipped school and argued with my grandparents all the time. I would often steal and lie. I don't know why I did, but I just couldn't stop. Whenever I skipped and stole, I get long lectures from my grandfather, telling me stories of his past, and they usually involve thieves or people who skip school, and he finally told me that if I kept this up, I'd become someone that he didn't want to be around. This made me feel bad, but something finally snapped. Me and Jack got into an argument. At this point, the friendship we had was basically abusive. We'd have a blast together, but oftentimes we'd get into physical fights and they often turned out in me getting beaten since I was weak and small. Due to that and the argument, we went our separate ways. He tried texting me on Facebook. I'd ignore him. When I turned 15 years old, I'd stopped stealing, lying, and skipping school. My grandfather also bought a trailer, the one I live in now. He bought it for me and my brother, and it somehow turned into me staying in it, and plans with several friends to travel across the US in it. Anyways, I'm now 16 years old, and Jack just shows up in the middle of the night. I was kinda agitated since I was tired and really didn't want to see him, but he needed a place to stay the night, so I let him. We didn't talk, so I stayed up on my laptop, making sure he didn't take anything. I fell asleep around eventually. When I woke up, he was gone, and so wasn't some of my stuff. It wasn't anything important, so I never said anything to anyone. Now, here's a part of the story everyone's probably been waiting for. I'm now 17. His younger brother, who I call John, was staying the night, however had nowhere to sleep, so he stayed in my trailer. I say that, but in reality, he was inside all night with my brother playing games. Sometime during the night, Jack showed up with some random guy who I'll call Jake. They said that they just needed to charge their phones for a minute. I don't know why, but I let them in. I went inside to tell John, and he came out with me, knowing his brother isn't a good person. I sit down on my couch, turn my computer monitor on. Jack notices, asks what I'm playing. It was Skyrim. We didn't talk after that. However, I kept watching him like a hawk. He told me in a very agitated voice that I should start playing the game. I was afraid of him, to be honest. Even though at this point in life I was bigger, he still scared me from the fights we had when we were younger. I started playing. I noticed the other dude acting super tweaky and jumpy. He was high. I could smell the weed coming off of him. Jack asked me if he can smoke in here. I say sure. He pulls out some paper for rolling cigarettes and weed. They roll a blunt and light. I thought they were just gonna smoke cigarettes. They pass it in between them for a bit, and then tells me to take a hit. I was curious, so I decided to just do it. It was awful after that. I just pretended to. They left after the blunt went out. But guess what? You probably guessed right. The other dude came back saying Jack messaged him, saying he was in the trailer bathroom, which was odd because I knew he wasn't. My grandpa had his own trailer, so we checked there, nothing. We went back to my trailer so he could text Jack. After a few minutes, I shit you not, the man pulls out a gun, a real gun. When he was in here earlier, he was playing BB gun. So when he pulled out this gun mumbling stuff, me and John were kind of laughing, thinking that it's a joke. It wasn't. Me and John realized this and both stood. He said that he wouldn't shoot John since he's Jack's brother unless he did something, and would shoot me if I didn't listen. You ever heard of the fight, flight, freeze response? Basically, when confronted with a dangerous situation, people will either fight, run, or freeze. I froze. I was afraid. Luckily, John was there. He may be younger, but he gave me just enough confidence to try talking the guy out of it, but it wasn't enough. Eventually, I succumbed, giving him what he wanted. He left. I was scared shitless, and John was pissed. After about 10 minutes, we had the great idea of going out to look for him. Luckily, we didn't find him. Want to know where Jack was texted from? He was texting on his way to Texas, by the way. Anyways, I didn't call the cops until the next day out of shame of letting the robber in, and for letting myself be robbed. That being said, this all happened because Jack didn't like me, and had his friend steal my shit, so take this as a message and don't hang out with the wrong kind of people. Friend with seemingly ulterior motives. Don't know if this story qualifies as a let's not meet story, but I met this guy in my local pub. He was 24 years old and I was 18. He was a friend of a friend, and he seemed normal enough, and I suppose we clicked. The following week, he invites me around to his flat, and we have drinks and chat. This becomes a regular weekly thing. However, after a while, he starts to say and do things that in hindsight were really strange and creepy. One day, we were standing by his living room window, looking out across the adjacent river. We used a telescope to look at the far bank. Randomly, he turns to me, looks me in the eye, and says, "Wow, you're gorgeously tall." At the time, I didn't think anything of it. Thought it was a rather strange thing for one bloke to say to another, but okay. Second, Our weekend I've been out with other friends, the regular gang, to a pub that was in view of his flat. Quite often we'll all stand around the back to smoke. This following week, I go around the guy's flats, and we talk for a bit, and out of nowhere he says, "You act different when you're around your friends." I was puzzled and asked what he meant. "I was watching you from the window. You act different. It's not you." From then on, he occasionally went on big bullshit rants on how they're not really my friends, because I was supposed to act like myself, and when I can't do that, it's weird. How did he deduce that? From watching me having a ciggy with them. One notable event on a weekday night, I was in the pub, been out the back occasionally for a smoke, went out again for another smoke, and got a text from him saying, "That's your fourth one tonight." Third, he'd often ask me to stay over and always declined, mainly because there was never any need to, because my house was only a 15-minute walk away. One day he practically begged me to stay over, and I really didn't want to. I kept saying no, getting quite annoyed. He followed me to the lift, and I saw his face as the doors closed. He was angry. When the doors finally closed, I heard a loud bang from the other side. It sounded like he punched the lift doors. Fourth and finally, one day I was around at his flat, and we were sitting on the couch watching music videos on his laptop. He says he wants to put a song on. He puts on Buddy Holly, True Love Ways, and says, "This song reminds me of our friendship." Then gets some body butter out of a drawer and proceeds to give me a massage. That took the cake. That was it. A little too weird for me, thank you. He asked me if I enjoyed it, and I said no. Made up some shit excuse about needing my tea and got out of there. Never went back since. Saw him once on the street a few weeks later after ignoring his messages, but I had shaved my head, and thankfully, he didn't recognize me.